Hey guys, welcome back to Daniel's Tech World on YouTube. My name is Daniel Rosehill. Recording this video on the 22nd of January 2024. I'm just about finishing up with all my kind of backup and archival project. I tend to kind of tweak my methods every couple of years, write a blog about it. Now I have this YouTube channel. And then just kind of set it and forget it for the next couple of years, which is really what you want to do with backups and archival. You don't want to be kind of this taking over your life. It's important to remember that this is only protecting the data. Then it's kind of nice to go back out to living and making data and creating whatever you're backing up. So what I thought I would do in this video is kind of put together all the different processes and trains of thoughts in my previous videos. And try to give an overview of my current optical media archival workflow as it stands on this date, which is why I mentioned the date, because it's subject to change. So I've broken this down into the different stages, and we're going to go through them one by one. It's not massively elaborate at all compared to when I was doing backups of web servers, incremental stuff, and backing up to the cloud. And scripting. The process for archiving personal data is actually pretty straightforward, I think. So the first step is you're going to be out there generating your data. I use the MDisk and optical archival for videos I've mentioned many times, but you might be a podcaster, you might be a blogger, you might be a journalist, you might be all of those things, and or an architect creating CAD files, or whatever the case may be. You're out there creating some kind of data that you want to protect through the 3-2-1 process of duplicating it on-site and off-site, so that if it ever gets lost on the primary storage, you can retrieve it from archive. So really using archive as a form of backup. So the step here is storing data on some temporary storage medium. So I use, I said like an NAS or a cloud server. I personally dump stuff on my NAS before it goes out to archival. But if you don't have an NAS, you could just put it on your computer, or maybe you've got good internet and you're putting all your video projects up on a cloud server. That might work as well. So just keep doing that. And then you store the data there until it's ready to go out to archive. This is where I think my method could be better because it's manual. I just kind of like eyeball the amount of data in my folder, and then when it's like at about 20, I say 22 because you never really want to fill up these disks all the way, I've heard. One thing I haven't done yet, and this might be where I can improve next, is using parity. This is something I haven't done to date, and I've heard people recommend it, so I might look into that. But yeah, I say 22 just because sometimes the burning software, this is if you're doing 25 gig Blu-rays, sometimes the burning software complains if you like really almost pack in the whole disk. So you can keep it in this intermediate storage. Maybe you do it on a time basis, like you're doing it every quarter, or maybe just it's until you're ready to fill up a disk or whatever you're using. Could be a hard drive. This archival methodology for some parts isn't really medium specific, but I'm of course looking at it from the optical storage standpoint. So okay, then the next thing is optical media creation. So when you're ready to put stuff out to archive, you want to select what kind of optical media is going to work. Depending on how much data you've got, how thin you want to slice it. So I mentioned in a previous video that I think that's one reason why DVDs still have a place in the world, even in optical archival, because you might just prefer to separate your data out more granularly, and we'll see why that might be useful when we look at cataloging. Like you might want to say, okay, I want to put my photos in one disk, I want to put my videos on another disk, my articles on a third disk, my podcasts on a fourth disk. You know what I mean? So creating 4 different discs each month based on the different types of media, so that if you need to grab something, you don't have it all kind of blended together with other stuff. So the stuff on the market suitable for archival really is, I will address that there's one more video to do always. I'm going to address why some people think that MDisk, they have skepticism about it, but as I've mentioned a few times, I don't have doubts about the technology. So I think that's kind of the standard recommendation. is MDisc as best in class for archival, whether it's DVD, the diminishing pool of DVDs on the markets, or the Blu-ray versions, which go from 25 up to 100 gigs. But there's also archival grade. Verbatim have, and actually a few manufacturers have put out these fancy gold CDs and DVDs, and they usually say some kind of lifespan. The Canadian Conservation Institute said that gold CDs should be good for 100 years, which I think I've made the point before is kind of like the maximum point, that if you're really thinking about archival from a kind of long-term standpoint, you're kind of looking to protect it for maybe one generation. So I think beyond 100, there's no real advantage to 200 or 300 years. But the golds, see, unless you're burying a time capsule full of data, and even then you have to count on the fact that the stuff will be readable. So anyway, that's more kind of crazy thinking. Gold CDRs, so yeah, 100 years, and the DVD with the gold layer, I think it's safe to assume it's about similar. The MDiscs say 1000. So look at capacity, and I would advise choosing from one of the archival grade media, and not bothering with the Data Life Plus or the stuff that just has an ASO die in it. When these products are a bit more expensive, but if you're investing in this system, you would probably want to do it as well as you can. So then you want to burn at least 2 copies of the data, of course, for archiving, one for on-site, one for off-site. I've mentioned that that's 3-2-1. I've mentioned you can also do 4-3-2, which would be 3 different forms of media and 2 off-site copies. Or you can do 5-4-3 or 6-5-4. I mean, there is a point at which you kind of have to think, are you actually de-risking the process any further by creating more offsite data stores? But if you really, really want to create as much redundancy as possible, make sure that even if an MDisc randomly dies or a CD randomly dies, that you have, that's the best way to do it. I mean, it would be to just kind of create a bunch of copies. This is why if you happen to become a famous recording artist, for example, or a filmmaker, those guys never have to worry about their work being lost because there's so many copies, so many places in the world. But as someone who's not yet creating famous content, you can try to replicate that by going for 4-3-2 or just stepping up the off-site duplication a bit if you have the patience, and of course it's going to cost more money on media and more time on burning. Those would be the downsides. So an additional step I mentioned in a few videos is generating checksums on the files that you want to put out to archive. I don't think I'm going to be doing this for all my discs. I just did it for one MDisc just so I could kind of test out how well it really works. But the reason I'm not planning to do this for every disc is I kind of feel like, what's the point? If the data is imperfect and a file doesn't open, then okay, it's running the checksum or having the checksum isn't going to fix that. What it might do, I mean, and then if it's a little bit corrupted but it's not noticeable, in my use case, I would say, well, that's okay. That's not really a big deal. That's fine. But yeah, you might have your own reasons why you want to use checksums on every disk. So you can store the checksums on the media itself. Some people have advocated this approach. So that would be just literally, creating a checksum file and burning that with your optical media. Another approach would be to just store the checksum somewhere else. That might be your computer, that might be the cloud, that might be on a cataloging software, and you could even do that on optical media. You could actually, obviously, the checksum for I mean, it's kind of, if you think about this stuff too much, you start to go a little bit crazy. If you did the checksum for the checksum optical media, that would not make sense. But you could do write, save your checksums on your computer and write those off to an optical media every 100 disk checksums that you've recorded. That would be one approach. Or I think this would be a good use case for using the cloud or whatever else. But I think some people are into optical because they really hate the cloud. So I'm always hesitant to recommend it for anything. You could probably find some creative solution. Checksums are just a few lines of text. And you could store it on, I don't know. Yeah, optical media might actually work for that. Offsite it to your friend's house or something. Then do you have cataloging? So this was today's video about using VVV. It's a nice little tool. Again, I would suggest this isn't something that everyone will want to do. I'm even on the fence about it. Like, is it worth doing this? But I probably will, because it only takes a few minutes. So I did a video today about how to use VVV it's a cataloging software, and there's also one for Windows, I believe, called WinCatalog. And these are software that are designed to help you catalog your physical disks. You can record the disk's file structure, save that, and then again, you'll probably want to back up the actual catalog file to the cloud or something. Or again, you could use Optical Media even for this purpose. So one thought I had when I played around with this software is my original idea of giving each disk a unique identifier, starting with A001, then A002, then A0, etc. That actually does make sense if you're using a catalog software, because all you need to do is write A001 somewhere on the disk or the jewel case. You don't need to write any description of what's on it, because you can have that all known from the cataloging software. I had the idea, and I think this was actually quite a good idea, would be you could put the checksums into the cataloging software. So I saw that VVV didn't have the option to create a custom data type, like a metadata type, because it would be amazing if you could add MD5 and SHA-256 or whatever checksums you like, and say, okay, let's have a field for this, and every time I write a disk, I'll just quickly paste in the checksum. But as I said earlier, I have mixed feelings, because if you discover from the checksum process that your file is corrupted, you might know that anyway because it can't play. And the question becomes, is there any actual utility to having that data? If you do, like me, want to run your own little experiments on the MDisk just for fun, that's a different case. I've created a test MDisk with the checksum on the whole disk and checksums on all the files, and that'll be my little kind of pet project to see how well that data actually really holds up. So for physical disk storage, I did a video today, so I'm really trying to tie together all my videos here. They're all on this YouTube channel, Daniel's Tech World. So as I said, if you want to write on the disk, you can do that, but use an optical safe permanent marker. It's a water-based permanent marker. And some people say verbatim have fields on the disk. But the Canadian Conservation Institute material scientist, I was watching him last night on YouTube, you can't really get more of an expert than that, I think. That's his whole job, I presume, is conserving stuff on storage. And he said, just write on the inset, like the little thing around the center where there's no data. So if you want to be really safe, do that. Or if you want to be even safer, don't write on the disk at all and just label your jewel cases. The only advantage to writing on the disk is so you don't get the cases and the disks mixed up. So you can choose which approach based on your own level of risk tolerance. I think once you're not putting labels on, you're probably going to be okay. Whatever permanent marker you use. I've heard a lot of folks on Reddit. I came across a new subreddit today called Data Curation. So there's another one to know about in addition to Data Hoarder. And people are like, yeah, I've been using just regular permanent markers for 20 years and everything is fine. So I get the feeling it doesn't really matter. That's my personal thing, but some people do. So whatever. But for storage, one thing there is consensus around is that individual jewel cases are probably going to be your best bet. They're pretty cheap these days, and you can get slimline ones that are kind of skinnier than the ones that some of us may remember our parents keeping their CDs in back in the day, when CDs were not something only weird people like me were into, and CD collectors, of course. So you can get them, and they're really cheap CD jewel cases these days. Because all this stuff is kind of less popular, my standing recommendation is, if you're buying stuff like jewel cases, just like get 200 of them, because you never know when someone selling them will stop selling them and it'll be harder to get them. So I bought 100 recently just to make sure I have supply for a couple of years of archiving. And then for how to store the discs, this is one thing that I haven't really thought about. Do you want to keep them vertical? Do you want to keep them horizontal? I would not be surprised if people had opinions on that. One thing you will find data about is the temperature and relative humidity and the temperature change rates. and you also want to keep them out of UV light. So put them in boxes of some sort. I had the mad idea here just as I was writing this to, what about a grow tent? Because a grow tent is, you know, but then you're using electricity, and I feel like one of the nice things about optical storage is they are electricity free. And I think there's a case to be made that they might be, there might be an eco case to be made for the optical media, that it's actually an eco-friendlier form of storage than cloud computing, which of course requires electricity to be kept running. So I feel like if you go ahead and put them in a big grow tent, you would be negating all that benefit. But I don't know, it could be a fun thing for someone who has a grow tent to try. And just regarding what they say about the temperature and all that stuff, yeah, people seem to have different recommendations. Some people say this degree, that degree, and this RH level, this RH level. I wouldn't be worried. I would just keep them away from, as it says, freezing. Even though the Blu-rays actually, I think, are supposed to be able to be fine down to minus 20 degrees Celsius. So look, if you're living in Siberian Russia, or you're living in, some place without any cooling in sub-Saharan Africa, this might be a concern. I think if you're in a relatively, I think the humidity concern would be a bigger concern for most people in most parts of the world, that you wouldn't want to have them in somewhere that's permanently, I grew up in Ireland, as I've mentioned a few times, and there are certain places by the coast that are like really, really damp almost permanently. So it actually wouldn't be a crazy idea to buy a little RH, relative humidity measurement thing. They're very cheap, and just make sure they're not getting too humid or too dry, conversely. If you're living somewhere very prone to humidity, just make sure they're in that ideal. I would say you don't have to be super finicky. It's not like conserving cigars, although maybe it is a bit like conserving cigars. But anyway, I would say the main focuses should be not subjecting this physical storage media to anything too extreme regarding temperature, humidity, or whatever. And you should hopefully, that's kind of as much as there comes a point where if a disk is going to fail, it's going to fail. There's only so much you can do, I think, to protect the media. And probably the biggest thing you can do is get the best storage media possible. I would say that's probably, my feeling is that's more important than than if it's at 20% humidity versus 30. So just to say, this is only my current approach as of, what was the date again? 22 of January 2024. The reason I made this video is to share it with other people interested in optical archival. So therefore, I would love to hear from other people with ideas to make this process better. There's no universally accepted one right way to do this. This is just my approach. If you have your own approach, I'd love to hear about it. Thanks for watching this video today, and until the next one, wishing you well.